Okay, so today we're going to talk about negative powers of scientific notation. Yesterday we talked about positive powers. Today we're doing negative. We're pretty much basically doing the same thing. We're going to go over this number and we're going to look at it and see how they change that to scientific notation and why it is a negative. So we start out with a number 0.0783. Now, the reason that I know this is a negative exponent to begin with is that the number starts with a decimal and there is no whole number in front of that decimal. And when I say whole number, I actually mean natural number 1, 2, 3. If there's a 0 in front of it, it's still going to be a negative scientific notation unless it has a natural number in front. So because this starts with a decimal, we are going to look and we're going to remember what we said yesterday. When I'm looking at scientific notation, there has to be one number in front of the decimal, a natural number, and there can only be one number. So if I'm thinking about that, I'm going to need to move my decimal between that 7 and that 8, because then I can write 7.83 and I only have one number in front of the decimal. Now I need to figure out how many times I moved from here to here. So I'm going to say 1, 2, and then I'm going to have times 10 to the negative 2. It is a negative exponent because it started out as a decimal and not as a natural number. Let's take a look at the example they give us here. Now this one's a little bit different and it can be a little confusing. We're going to take this number. I always tell everyone to drop off this 0 that's in front of the decimal so that we don't get confused and count that as one of our zeros. I need to move the decimal from here, and then I have to have one natural number in front of the decimal, which means that that is going to have to end up right back here behind that 3, because 3 is a natural number. So when I am looking at the first part of my sentence, 3 is my number, because if the decimal ends here, I can drop it off. It could look like 3 decimal, but as we all know, if there's a decimal after a natural number, then we can drop it off as long as there's no numbers after it. Okay, so now I need to look and I need to see how many times I moved. I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so I moved that 8 times, which means it's going to be 10 to the negative 8. Okay, so when I go to write my sentence, it's going to be 3 times 10 to the negative 8. And that is how I would write the scientific notation. Let's take a look at these down here. And let's look at that, how they tell us to break it down, because I like this a little bit better than the other way. Okay, so my power of 10 is going to be my exponent. And if I look at this number, my exponent is negative 4. My exponent, and this is how I remember this, I need to move, if I'm going from scientific notation to standard notation, I need to move my decimal away from the 4. I point an arrow, and if the arrow is going to hit the 4, that's the wrong way. So I'm going to move to the left, and my decimal is going to be left. I'm going to move it 4 places because that's what it tells me to do. And then to write it in standard notation, let me move this up a little bit. I'm actually going to write it out, 3.21. That's the number we have up here. And I'm going to move that decimal 4 places to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to place it here. And I'm going to fill in all these little bumps that I just put there. And then I always want to make sure that I go and rewrite it, because if I leave it like this, then I have 2 decimals in the number and I don't know what's going on. Okay, let's try another one. 6.7 times 10 to the negative, sorry, my eyes are crazy, to the negative 8. So we're going to say that our power of 10 is negative 8. Remember I said point the arrow away from the exponent, so we're going to go left, and we're going to move it 8 times. So I'm going to write 6.7, and then I'm going to take this decimal and I'm going to move it 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, I'm going to put the decimal there. Then I'm going to add. Okay, if you notice, I added 7 zeros here, and in the number before, even though my exponent was 4, I added 3 zeros. That's because we take into account this first number. So if you can remember that you're having to move 1 spot and you would need to take 1 away from this 8, then you could actually just say point and then put 7 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 7. Okay, if you can't remember that, if you don't understand that when you take 1 away from 8 because we're accounting for this number here, that makes 7, then just go ahead and draw it out and put all of your zeros. If you have any questions, please come see me during zero period.